Hello and welcome to the Dad and Buried podcast. It is a very special episode today. As you know, my name is Mike, aka Dad and Buried. I sit atop an impressive, at the very least, impressive social media empire on Instagram, although it's dwindling by the day because I spoke about Trump again yesterday. And normally I am joined by my co-host with zero social media presence, Pete. And Pete was unable to make it this week. And since we missed last week, and we certainly don't want to miss two in a row, we went to the B team. I reached out to Mom and Buried, my wife Heather, as you can see, who's already offended that I referred to her as the B team. What are you, a D cup?
B team, please. You finally got someone with some clout on here with you.
I was referring to your cup size. I don't really know how that works. I know a lot of people have been asking you. A lot of people have been asking you on Instagram lately if they're real or not. I don't know if you want to flash, let people know.
They ain't me, though.
She's declining to flash. Anyway, Mama Buried is my equal half. I don't say better half because I think that's rude in 2020. And, you know, to her and I both. She has, like 97,000 followers on Instagram? You're getting there.
I think we're at close to 99. I don't know. So very close to 100. I'm hot on your tails.
If you're not following her, please go give her a hand and get her to 100. She'll be very happy. When I got to 100, you poured water on top of me or something like that?
Did I?
Something like that. I was announcing...
I feel like there should be champagne for me, which is just generally how I feel about champagne.
There's always champagne when you're around.
But in general, you know, just quick plug, I am far more likable.
Is that true?
Funny. Everyone agrees that I'm better and more, you know.
First of all, you're riffing off a fortune cookie. You're riffing off a fortune I got in a fortune cookie once that said, everyone agrees you're the best, which is the greatest and most accurate fortune cookie I've ever received.
Right. Well, anyway.
For
having me.
Well, it's especially relevant for you to be joining this week because the topic, before we even knew you were going to be on as my co-host, is arguing in front of your kids. And it is not something I have any experience with because we have an absolutely perfect marriage. I don't think we've ever even argued, except maybe that when we argued that I prefer Clueless to Mean Girls and you got upset.
That's not true. Clueless is clearly better, but let's give Mean Girls some respect. It doesn't matter. At any rate, clearly I am a great expert to consult since, you know.
A great expert.
Yeah, well, I'm better at it than you a little bit, I think.
Better at arguing in front of the kids?
No, just arguing in general. But yes, we have argued in front of the kids.
The scene at the beach over vacation last week would beg to differ, but maybe we can get into that a little bit later. So we were on vacation last week. We went to Cape Cod and basically stayed inside most of the time, partially because we're responsible social distancers and partially because it was rainy half of the week. And then we promptly got back to Brooklyn and it's been 100 degrees and my face has been melting off. Oh, you may notice I got a haircut. I have not been on camera unless you follow me on Instagram, which I hope you do. I was finally beaten down by my wife into getting a haircut.
Look how handsome he looks.
I look better. The debate was never that I looked good with my hair like that. It was just me throwing caution to the wind and then letting the hair just go. Let's just see what happens. We saw what happens. It was nearly a divorce.
Imminent divorce, yes.
Yes. So I am back to being a little bit more respectful, though I'm wearing my hat as I tend to do because I like my hat. It's an amazing hat. I think it was a gift from Mama Bear.
Yes, yours truly, because I'm an amazing gift giver.
We can argue about the gift giving later. I know we did a live a couple of weeks ago, and we got an argument about gift giving where you got offended because I said you're not as good as you used to be. Remember?
Well, at least I started at the top.
You see, the episode is about arguing in front of kids, but let's talk a little bit about arguing. What I did there was a classic blunder. I reminded you of an earlier argument there was no reason to bring that up.
Which you've already done. Like, we've been recording 30 seconds, and you've already broke out 2 arguments to discuss. I mean, if you want to revisit, buddy, we can go down that path.
I am not a smart man, I think, as viewers and listeners can attest. Although I do have a wealth of pop culture knowledge, which comes in handy almost never. Although that one time I almost made it on the game show. That might have been nice. Anyway,
move along, buddy.
You know what?
You need some help with this whole format thing.
Anyway, so this week we're going to be talking about arguing in front of kids, whether you do it, whether you have any tips for doing it, how you handle it. A lot of people seem to think it's worthwhile, and we're going to get into that in a minute, right when we get back after this. But everyone, please, a warm welcome to Heather, aka Mama Buried. She needs a few more followers to get a little bit closer to me, but I appreciate her stepping in for Pete. And we'll see how she does. It's her first time, so go easy on her. Right? You have nothing to say to that? So you're going to get mad.
Thank you. And you're welcome, I believe.
You're welcome. Okay. We'll be back right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Dad and Buried podcast. Again, we are joined by special co-host, Mom and Buried. Hello, Mom and Buried. Is it not weird to refer to each other as Mama Buried and Dad and Buried, which we never do except in lives and on this podcast?
I'm actually getting kind of used to it.
Yeah?
I don't know. I've almost done it, in person, and that's a little weird.
It is weird. It's even more weird in bed, which has never happened.
It's never happened.
Right? Imagine that.
Let's not imagine that now. Sounds fun.
Let's not imagine that. Anyway, so we are going to be talking about arguing in front of kids, because this is not a marriage podcast. It is a parenting podcast. And Heather was a little bit confused. She thought we were just going to be talking about arguing. We can argue about what the topic is going to be in a minute. But before we do, I want to remind everybody. I'm sorry? You have something to say?
No. Please. Go ahead and talk about some of the amazing supporters.
I want to remind everybody where you can listen to the podcast. And the first person I want to remind is Heather, because she has never, ever listened to the podcast, which you can get on Apple and Spotify and anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And a lot of people do. We have over 200 reviews on Apple, if you want, or ratings at least. If you want to go give us 5 stars, please do. If this is your first time listening because Mom Barry brought you here, please go to Apple and give us a subscription and a rating and maybe a review if you like. Please don't use the review as an opportunity to praise my wife and bash me like you often do in my DMs. I mean,
if it comes up and you want to talk about how, this is the best episode ever and she should be on more, and maybe it should be the Mom and Barry podcast, I mean, it can come up. But do review and do listen. I've heard snippets. And I hear great things about the podcast. I'm least likely to listen to this one because I actually don't like hearing my own voice. But we'll see how it goes.
Well, you know what? I love hearing your voice, especially when it's enraged. Anyway, so I do want to thank everybody who has left us reviews and ratings, and also the many people who contribute money via Anchor, Ryan Miller and MS Babayan, or via Patreon, where you can be a patron and then throw us a little cash. So I'm going to run through the list of names. Check Your Kids at the Door, Chris Coleman, M. Cedeno, Mallory McKenzie, Miriam, Tina Davis, Lindsay Woodruff, Andrea Sandoval, Barbara Geiger, Bill D'Amica, Dana Bosday, Jacques Govar, Morning Glow, Cotton Farmer AZ, Wes Clark, Jennifer Wynn, Julie McCarthy, our old friend, Paula Polsky, Mary Williams, and our friend Julie Burton, KSU Julie, who won't stop talking about Mahomes. You couldn't care less about Mahomes, right? You don't care about football very much?
I know that's, in fact, a football player.
Well, there you go. Anyway, thank you all for being a supporter, whether it's with your wallet or with your words. We very much appreciate that. And now that we've done kind of, what do they call that? Not the housekeeping, I guess. These are the nuts and bolts.
Sure.
Now we're going to get into the topic. And the topic is arguing in front of kids. Now,
can I just say one thing real quick? So I don't know what genius made this idea to actually do this differently than normal, in the middle of the day, and alcohol's not involved when you're talking about arguing.
It's your idea.
It was little of my idea, timing-wise. But, I should really have a mug of, wine right here. I'm really failing on multiple levels because this is not the episode, it feels like, to not have alcohol. But you know what? We'll try it out. We'll see what happens. We might need alcohol after.
You know what? Let's give it a go. So I brought up the topic and I said, do you argue in front of your kids? What are your tactics? Do you have any pro tips? And it turns out a lot of people do argue in front of their kids, and we're going to get into why. Mostly because your kids are everywhere all the time, and there's really no avoiding it. But K Kick 53 says we argue in hostile whispers, which I think is a fun way to go about it. I think we don't really do that.
No. I'm not good at whispering. We do occasionally,
You're not good at whispering. Neither are the kids.
We do flip each other off behind each other, behind the kids' back.
You tell me to go to hell a lot.
Go to hell, yes.
You do tell me to go to hell a lot, and it really escalates things because it's really nasty the way you say it.
Well, I'm really good at cussing. I'm really good at it.
Is hell a cuss? Is hell a cuss?
I don't know, but sometimes it just has to be said. But yes, we don't really do that. I feel like it's either we're keeping it, simmering, or the top's gonna blow. Those are the two options.
So J_9.83 says, I don't argue. I sit and look blank, then blink real slow and say, uh-huh. And if I do something like that, which you call like my smug face, or if I'm quiet and I just have what you call my smug face, you get very upset.
The smug face is pretty. It's super smug, guys. You guys know Dad and Barry. You've seen him on Instagram and stuff. You've even just seen his posts. You can tell his smug face is freaking intense, and nothing will make me more angry than the smug face. Talking about the smug face is getting me angry. Can you tell?
So usually the smug face, which I contend does not exist, I think happens when you are in the middle of some kind of rant, and I'm just letting you go, and I'm just sitting there passively listening, because that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to take it all in so that I can hear you and hear your grievances, and process them and then respond in kind. But before I'm able to respond, you often say, stop looking at me with that fucking smug face, and then you say, go to hell, and then shit gets ugly.
I will say arguments like that do not typically happen in front of the kids. That's not.
I was just gonna say that, yeah.
We're like smug face level arguing. The kids are somewhere else. But I feel like some ladies would understand. Now, when I first heard that gentleman's comment with the and stuff, I mean, it sounds good. It sounds good in theory. Like, if there are gentlemen available who will just basically agree that I am right and they are wrong and remedy it immediately.
If there are gentlemen available, is that what you said?
Consider a new situation. Huh?
You said if there are gentlemen available who will just say that you were right all the time, so that's what you're looking for?
Not all the time, because that's boring, but most of it when I am right, which is usually.
Okay, whatever, dude. So it's funny. So I was going to say the same thing, that usually when we get to the go to hell aspect of the conversation, or when you're accusing me of having a smug face, that is usually when the kids are in bed or in another room pretending to sleep.
That's some after hours arguing.
So one of the themes I got in the responses was that, yes, we argue in front of the kids, and it is good for them, right? So Elena.Grant says, it's important for kids to learn healthy communication skills and see that there is no perfect relationship. Actually, her comment got cut off, so she says, see that there is no perfect. So maybe she just meant see that there is no perfect. Maybe she meant see that there is no perfect relationship. Maybe she meant there is no perfect way to argue. I'll say that there is a perfect way to argue, and it is my way, because I'm amazing at it, and I usually win every argument. You disagree?
What is your way again, besides
being right? I'm the one who's more right, and even when I'm not right, I'm good at arguing that I am right, or at least going quiet, and you just get so mad that by virtue of you blowing your top, I end up winning.
Well, that's what you think, because this is what a gentleman can do, or at least this gentleman can do. MJ is known for completely inciting the situation and then being like, well, you're the one really upset. You're the one making a big deal about it, after he's made a deal. And then, like, I freaking lost it. And I understand that I'm, like, off the reservation or whatever at that point. But it is not a one-person situation. There were two people that escalated the situation.
Two things here. You're accusing me of gaslighting, which is false. You are just crazy in imagining that.
That's a really good thing to say to literally anyone, especially a woman. Continue.
That was just me gaslighting you again. Two, off the reservation is a racially tinged phrase.
Yeah,
You try not to say that anymore.
I'm trying to think of another.
I said
I apologize.
months ago, I said gypped, which derives from the term gypsy, which is also an ethnic slur. And Julie McCarthy, our friend, messaged me immediately to get mad at me. I do acknowledge I should not have said that, as you acknowledge you shouldn't say off the reservation. There's a lot of things.
It came out of my mouth, and I was like trying to think of another word for it. But you were also really angering me, so I apologize in that moment.
What else is new? I'm very good at making you kind of lose control. So Jess_Fairley says, we do argue in front of the kids at times. We don't scream and throw things when we argue, so I don't feel it's traumatic for the kids. I think it's important for them to see that even healthy relationships aren't perfect 100% of the time. It's fine to be upset with someone, apologize or fix it and move on. I agree with her. You have never apologized to me, I don't think, ever once.
I have definitely said that I am sorry that happened.
Yeah, that's not an apology. So the important thing here is, and I do think there is some validity to this, that we're going to argue. Your kids are around all the time. It happens, whether it's about Clueless versus Mean Girls, or about you wanting me to ask my mom for something in the in-laws situation, or anything at all, or what movie we're going to watch just in general. That happens almost every night.
Wait, yeah, no, I mean, those are bickering and arguing's different, right?
Yeah.
Though, like bickering in front of kids, and I have to say, sometimes our oldest has been like, well, I don't like you guys fighting. At that point, we might be bickering.
We're getting into that.
Over, a TV show, and I've tried to describe how that's different. But before we get into that, which I guess we're going down that road, I do have things to say to the last two comments, or do you want to tell me the next one? Because
what you have to say.
Well,
please.
Just about it being healthy, and also, to the person who said, we don't escalate it to screaming, we're not throwing things.
Right.
Nothing like that. That hits home with me because, honestly, I grew up in a home that, at least for a period of time, my parents were arguing to that level.
Yelling.
Screaming, throwing things. They separated for a short time, and I remember being that kid who would hide from it. It was terrifying. It was scary. It was confusing, I think, to a kid. And, so sometimes I even struggle with like the guilt of our arguing in front of kids, I think, which I know does not in any way compare to what I witnessed as a kid. Even though my parents, they made it through and they're great and they're still together. Going strong, like 50th anniversary this year. It was a hard time when we were, woo, that's a huge accomplishment. If we make that, I mean, holy shit, what an accomplishment.
You think I'm going to last another 30 years just alive with or without you?
I don't know, not the way you live.
Wow.
Just teasing. But no, I think that, sometimes, because of course your history affects you.
You internalize that stuff, right? So the stuff that you grow up with, you see the bickering and even real arguing can cause a lot of tension, and kids can be aware of it. But when it gets to like yelling and it becomes kind of like a war zone, that can be really tough. So Crystal Brook, with 2 zeros instead of O's, says, if we disagree, it's always civil, no yelling or degrading. If it's a child-friendly topic, which is not finances or anything, then we'll discuss it with the kids there if we can, because the kids are often too loud for them to even have a conversation. If it's something we feel we shouldn't hear or have to worry about, or they shouldn't hear or have to worry about, we discuss it later. She says, my parents fought in front of me and my sister, and they were mean, screaming, cursing, slamming things, degrading each other, bringing up completely irrelevant irrelevant shit from the past, etc. It was bad. So I grew up thinking that was normal, and it took me into my late 20s to realize that it was, in fact, not normal. It seems like you've always known that wasn't normal, and it's something you often bring up that you get nervous about. If we do occasionally have a bad argument, you get a little bit nervous that, you don't want our kids growing up in that kind of environment. In which case, if you are in an environment where you're constantly going at each other and screaming like that, sometimes you got to wonder, like, is it worth it? Maybe you should separate for a little while, and whether it's for 20 minutes to calm down or whether reevaluate the relationship, because people are stuck on, you got to make the marriage work for the kids. But if the kids are growing up in a really terrible atmosphere, maybe the marriage shouldn't work. I'm not saying that's going on between you and me.
No. And I mean, I think that person's comment is actually helpful to hear. As someone who grew up with parents who didn't fight fair and, had those things, and it's just a toxic environment, at least at some point, yeah, I do think I've always known it was wrong. I internalized from a young age that I didn't want that. And, and so, yes, like you said, MJ, like sometimes I'll get the fear, even though I know at the heart of it, and this is so helpful to hear people's comments, that our version versus the version I was experiencing is night and day, of course, there's all the mom guilt, there's all the parent guilt, there's all the just guilt. I love some guilt. Ask MJ. I put it all on myself. So, there's that. But it's good to know that, if it's not to a toxic place, I do agree that there's something healthy in being like, hey, it's not all sunshine and roses. It's not a fairy tale. And as long as you're communicating and fighting and like having productive conversations, and they're also seeing you make up, I think that's a huge part of it.
We love to let the kids watch us make up, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah. We make up all over the place.
Get it going. Anyway,
Never happened.
You reminded me of something. So Casey Harrell says she has two perspectives. She grew up in a house. She says, I grew up in a house where my parents argued a lot and probably should have divorced. It fucked me up a bit until I understood better why they each did things. You could cut the tension with a knife. As an adult, I try to keep from arguing in front of my kids. And when we do, I try to talk about it later with them. So I think that's important. Bringing your kids aside later, discussing what you were talking about, and people do argue and that kind of thing. She says, kids are perceptive. And I know I internalize a lot of how I should be treated by how my dad treated my mom, which is, again, that's what they see. Regardless of what you tell your kids, they see how you act and behave, and that's what they copy. She said, and I had to unlearn that stuff later and get into a better frame of mind. She said, my husband is from a big Italian family with lots of general bickering that never really amounts to anything besides blowing off steam. So he's fine with arguing because it was never a serious thing with his family, and everyone always got over it. So you used to say that, like, when you visited me and my family, we would just start yelling at each other, not even arguing, just like debating.
Yeah, it's especially the art of debate. You have a dad who's a lawyer, and you all have that. And, anyone who's read your writing or anything, you can tell that you would have won debate. I don't know if you were in debate, but you would have been very good at it in your youth and now.
Argumentative.
Yeah, because I've heard you argue tons of things you don't even believe, but it's about the art of the debate.
It's fun. But the raising of the voice.
But yes, the first time I went to your house was a real shit show because I was real uncomfortable sitting at a dinner table with him and his dad at opposite ends of the table, just like at each other. I'm like, oh my God.
I was probably yelling at my dad about church, and he goes to McChurch, as I call it.
McChurch, it's so accurate.
He doesn't like the music. He doesn't want a long-winded homily. He just wants to get in and get out.
Like the best part of church. He wants like drive-through savior.
He just wants credit. He just wants credit for having gone, which, I can respect. You got to hedge your bets. So getting back to the nasty and yelling and trying to keep that out of the argument situation. So I thought this was a funny comment. Mombi of 2 says, we hash it out respectfully in front of the kids, and then we text the low blows to each other so the kids remain unaware. I passive-aggressively shit on you during my podcast and on Instagram and stuff, which...
Well, see, isn't it good I don't listen to your podcast?
I suppose it is.
I mean, that you can do it. I mean, obviously, I give you crap about the little stuff, like, just... your cleanliness. We all know the thing.
But here's the thing. I think that's little stuff. You don't.
No, I mean, it adds up. Like, I'm going a little insane right now with the state of our home after 6 months of isolation. And, and I'm kind of a neat freak and it gives me anxiety. Whatever.
You have no qualms. You have no qualms about calling me out for that kind of stuff in front of the kids.
No.
This isn't necessarily an argument.
It is bickering. That is bickering. And I do think, I don't know, whose comment this was earlier about, like, yes, is it child friendly or not? Like, we never get into finances in front of our kids, right? Like, we don't talk about the big crap like that, No,
not when they're around, unless we're like in the car or something with them, which is another interesting wrinkle, right? So a lot of the people say that it's impossible not to argue in front of your kids because they are around all the time. And arguments are organic and you can't schedule them. They just happen, right? So that's what Lauren Hollerbach says. It happens, fights are organic. They don't always occur away from the kids. Alba BYC says, we argue in front of our kids a little too often. We are working on waiting for them to not be in the same room, but what are you going to do? It's getting to the point where our kids argue the same way when they are bickering with each other. I know, terrible, but I mean, come on. Life isn't rainbows and butterflies. Yeah. And you shouldn't allow your kids to believe that because they are going to grow up one day and life isn't going to have a censored button for them unless you keep them locked up, but that's a whole other topic. Well,
that is a whole other topic, maybe for a future podcast.
She says, we're all just trying our best. And I agree. It's going to happen.
Hey, sunshine and rainbows, it's not that. And yes, they won't go away. It's inevitable.
And Pete and I have talked about how the worst shit ever is when you see your kids emulating you, or like when we see our oldest, berating the youngest in the way that you might berate me. Because you berate me a lot. That's the word I would use, berate.
I don't berate you. I simply provide information that I want you to utilize to improve upon certain behaviors, and you fail to execute them.
The best thing so far that we have going for us is that I have yet to hear Detective Munch tell the hammer to go to hell. But we will see. That may be coming up.
And the hammer hasn't brought it. I haven't seen him strike a smug face, although a little bit. His attitude lately.
His attitude.
Smug facey.
He is becoming a little smug. Yesterday I told him not to do something and he said, I don't care about you. Which that hurt.
So that's on you then.
Well, and then the other day Detective Munch told you he wished you weren't his mom. Is that true?
He wished I was dead, I believe.
Right. I have never said I wish you were dead to you. Let the record show. So
I think, or at least people have told me, you have to understand, Detective Munch and I are really close. He's almost 10. He's very sweet to me. I mean, he's probably nicer to me than
to me.
Certainly.
Yes,
but, that goes both ways sometimes.
Ouch.
I mean, it's just, anyway, he's very, takes care of mom. And so hearing that was like a knife in the heart. I know I'm going to hear it a million times. He's going to wish
more times,
dead. Yeah. But it hurt that one hurt. And I was going to say, actually, I mean, that's an aside, but he is a sensitive kid. So, like, sometimes, as I mentioned, he'll think that bickering is arguing, and, the minute it happens, like, he's been like, I don't want you to get divorced. And I'm like, I just want him to pick up his socks. Like, it's not like filing papers over that.
The funny thing is, you don't consider me leaving my socks around as divorce worthy, but I do consider you repeatedly telling me to not leave my socks around as divorce worthy. So that's something that we need to figure out. I'll get my dad involved. He is a lawyer. So Cheryl CHEARL 0433 says, we argue and my son hates it. He even screams at us to stop. We apologize after the fact. My husband always says we should go somewhere else to argue, but how do you do that with a 3 and a 5-year-old? I personally think it is okay for kids to see their parents argue because it is normal. We always explain that just because we argue doesn't mean we don't love each other.
Yeah.
And that's what you always say. Just because I leave socks around doesn't mean you don't still love me. Although there's probably a limit.
Okay, could we, I feel like it's starting to be, and obviously most people would agree these things are bickering things, starting to sound like I'm just some nag who calls out all this shit. I mean, you do some shit and you get angry. What do you get angry about? What do you get angry about?
What do I get angry about?
Come on, get your dirty laundry out there like you love to do around the house.
Here's something. So this isn't so much an arguing thing, but I've mentioned this on the podcast a bunch of times too. You will occasionally badmouth my parenting in front of the kids. That I consider sort of like a low blow kind of situation. It doesn't happen too often. I've mentioned it to you. I never call out your parenting, and that's not just because you're the world's best parent. It's because I'm a very kind person. I'm very aware of what our children are hearing. You also swear way too much. You swear way too much in front of the kids.
You know what?
And it's worse and worse. You care less and less.
Oh my God, I just don't fucking give a shit anymore. 6 months after of this stuff, when we live in New York, we pretty much live in like these rooms that we're in. And
yes, it's our room. It's where we live.
Yes, we live here. And I think I give zero fucks now.
I think you do too.
Again, I come by it honestly. At least I'm not throwing shit and calling you a mofo, because, step up there. But I did grow up in a house where my dad, who is actually a trucker. This is not, I swear it like a trucker, but I'm raised by a trucker. He's a good man, by the way. And he literally told me once when I was, I think, in junior high, because I was saying frickin' all the time, like freaking. Yeah. And he's like, oh, if you're going to frickin' say it, just fucking say it. And, I love him. He is a smart man. He's one of my favorite people on the planet.
So, in contrast, growing up, I could count on one hand how many times I heard my father swear, which was usually like shit. And I don't know if I ever heard my mom swear, to the point that I remember being home from college and her cat knocked some orange peels out of my hand, and I said, oh shit, in front of her, and I was like mortified that I had said it. Yeah. Because my mom is a very genteel woman. She does not swear at all. No. Damn is a stretch for her. It's not, I guess it would be weird. She's not like a Puritan in that like she has a problem hearing it. She inexplicably loves Dennis Leary, but I just never hear her swear. She is, as she's getting older, doing a little more. I feel like I've heard a few. She's loosened up. Maybe I helped her. I hope that I helped her out of her shell. Listen, I know that you're on one side of this or that, but I feel like with all, like parents in general, with all the stuff we have to worry about and the expectations of parents these days, that's the last one I'm going to give a fuck about. I agree with you to an extent. I just think sometimes. Yes, I understand your point there. I forget. Oh, the parenting though, the bad-mouthing parenting. I don't know if that's the term I would use, bad-mouthing parenting. It's never like, you're a horrible parent, you're a shit dad. Like, none of that ever happens. Because I don't think those things. I think you're a great dad. Hey. But I will get frustrated in that. And we can admit that we have different approaches, especially to parenting our ADHD 9-year-old. And that's a whole different that would be a great podcast, actually. But I think we're going to do that at some point. But it's funny because in much the same way that it's impossible to, isolate all your arguments so they're not in front of your kids, sometimes I'll respond to something in a way that you don't like in terms of how I'm disciplining one of the kids or whatever, and you will say it to me in front of them, where it's not that easy to be like, let the kids go in the other room and I'll talk about this with you another way, which is usually what we do. But there are some times where like you'll be like, oh, you shouldn't do that, and I'm just like, you need to have my back in this situation. Yeah, and I think that yes, I totally see how sometimes I could do that less. I know a lot of times it's like an immediate situation that I'm trying to like, he does have outbursts and things like that, and I'm trying to mitigate the situation or whatever. But yeah, I can see that. I would say. Wow. Hold on a second. I just want everyone to note that you agreed with me there, and you said I was right. I almost feel like we should stop the episode. No, I said I could leave that. A high note. And you know what I didn't say? I'm sorry. That's correct. I'm aware. Okay, listen. But I think that there are times, too, that, I do very much, because I can see going with the idea that, like,
there are definitely things or enforcements you've made that I don't agree with, but I'm going to be like, if that's what Dad said, that's what it is.
Sure.
Like, there's plenty of that where I'm like sitting there like, he's wrong.
So this is funny, right? So Little Charmer 80 brought this up, and I think we have both done this. I think this is actually it's just a really effective way of doing things. So she says, even though I'm a barely suppressed ball of rage 80% of the time, aren't we all? We don't actually tend to argue that often. She says, but what I like to do is express my dissatisfaction with my husband's actions via the kids, such as, oh, did Daddy not clean your teeth? Naughty Daddy. Or, well, Mommy's a bit busy doing everything else right now, but Daddy sat on his ass doing nothing, so why don't you go ask him? He loves it. I think the only time our kids have seen us shouting at each other would probably have been on an occasion. Well, so she goes into something else, but I do want to talk about this a little bit, where I will sometimes say something to the kids, like I'm having a conversation with them loud enough so that you hear.
Yeah.
Like if I'm like working or something and the kid needs to go to the potty and be like, what's Mommy doing that she can't do this, or something like that, or like, where's your, or something like that. Like just to kind of a passive aggressively put it out there, not to badmouth you in front of the kids, but for you to hear me saying that so you realize you've dropped the ball and you need to get on this.
Right. Well, I will say that we both do that.
Yes.
It's kind of fun sometimes.
It is.
You know, like just yesterday, I'm like, I don't know, I'm making your dinner and I have one hand here and I'm also cleaning this and da-da-da-da, and I believe Dad's laying on the bed right now, so why don't you go ask him? Or when they do that thing that kids do, that I think the moms can understand at least, where the kid will leave the kitchen next to you where you are getting a beverage and come 7 rooms and downstairs to ask me to do something that happens in the kitchen, and I'll be like, what the
But that's because he expects me to say no when he expects you to say yes.
Yes.
That's why they go to you.
I know. And I don't always say yes, by the way. And I got the iPad. I took the iPads away this week because I'm like, I'm really just sorry. I'm just sick of you fucking asking me. And you never asked Dad. So, you know what? I was trying to defer to you for a while. And then
I know. I hated that.
Wouldn't
like they always come to me.
And I'm like, fine, I'm just taking them. I'm just sick of you people. Stupid questions.
I hate that when they come to me. They're like, Mom said ask you. I'm like, why she keep saying ask me? Why don't you make a stand? The buck stops with Mom. Everyone's so...
Oh, thank you for admitting the buck stops with Mom. Yes, I'm the boss. That's right. No, like, yeah, of course. Fucking kids are the worst. They're the problem.
See, you're the perfect co-host. Kids are the worst. So Little Charmer 80 was continuing saying that the few times that they argue is when all of these ingredients were there. Long car journey, extremely hot, we were late, we were hungry, we were on the way to a family thing neither of us wanted to attend, and then often there'll be a showdown in the car. There are occasionally showdowns in the car, and no one can escape those.
Not a ton.
Sometimes it's because you're sick of listening to the music that I have on.
Yeah, but that's, again, bickering in one. It's been like 20 years. Can I just listen to Madonna or something?
Oh, I've never stopped.
I don't even want Madonna. But you know what I mean? I would turn on like a boy band or an 80s mix or something, and it's literally never occurred on any road trip in our entire relationship.
Why would I ever put on a boy band?
Music. Huh?
The only boy band I'm putting on is the Beatles.
Fine, an 80s. And I enjoy the Beatles.
All you ever want to listen to or watch is 80s stuff. What the hell? It's 40 years later.
I also enjoy the 90s. Early 2000s are good. There is lots of contemporary stuff I like, guys, and there's lots of indie stuff that we meet on the middle on. But sometimes I'm like, I just want something fun.
Oh, my God, I hate that. And then you try to find it on Netflix. Oh, what do you want to watch tonight? I don't know, something fun. What does that mean? It's meaningless.
Yes, something that is enjoyable to me. You just don't understand the concept of fun and what fun and enjoyment and happiness is like. So I think that's the disconnect there. I wanted to say one thing, though, because the other night, remember, we were leaving, and I wonder if this is just the kiddies coming, but we were leaving like a drive-in theater here in New York. And,
yeah, they set up they converted like a parking lot into a drive-in in Brooklyn, and we went and saw Grease.
It was awesome. And
my son asked me in the middle of it what jugs means. And he said, no, he didn't even ask me. he said jugs means boobs, right? And I was like, it sure does, son.
There are a couple questionable things too. I think it went over his head, but something about creaming
Yeah,
comes
the
up.
Grease Lightning song has things like that I didn't even. It wasn't that I never understood what those things meant. I could never hear. I never heard those words.
And there was subtitles on this,
yeah.
so it was like, oh crap! Now we're getting in it. But that's not the point. We were bickering on the way home. It was like 11 on a Tuesday. Everyone's tired, whatever, and not really fighting. I don't even know what it was about. Oh, that was about music. That was the music night, right? Yeah. And our son said, Munch said, like, guys, it's late. Everyone is tired.
You really did.
He was like justifying it for it. Yeah. He was being a great mediator. It helped so much, honestly, because it like broke the tension of like, you're right, buddy.
He's good. You know what? He's learning some problem solving. That's what's healthy for him to see the arguments. Because we will often say to him, you're tired or you're hungry, and that's why you're being such a son of a bitch. And he kind of recognized the same thing in us, which is fun. So I thought this was a funny comment, right? So, well, one thing, this is a weird name, Sarah._Ortega_ says, I wish I didn't argue in front of the kids, but I do. And then she says, now that they're teenagers, I even ask their opinion. So that will be interesting. When you and your future husband are fighting, and our teenagers happen to be at your house for that weekend, you get to ask them their opinion. Now, who do you think is right?
First of all, like there'd be another husband. Jesus, criminy. Like I'd go make that mistake.
Criminy?
I wanted to say Jesus Christ. I don't know why I stopped myself. You're welcome.
No one does. Criminy. But I think that's interesting that you can have. Obviously, you don't want to make your kids choose a side. But I assume this is more like kind of like a bickering situation where, I think I've even done this with our kids where we're trying to decide like what movie to watch or something, and you try to get your kid on your side or something like that.
They're never on my side unless my side happens to be a Marvel movie that day.
I have better taste in films and music than you. I think we can agree. You like Moulin Rouge, case closed. Anna Hutchings, _Hutchings_ says, we argue in front of them unless it's one of the top 5, and we save that for later. She did not indicate what her top 5 topics were, so I took a shot.
Please, Angela, top 5. So you made a list of the top, Anna, the top 5 things to argue about. You made one.
I'm guessing, this is what I think her top 5, or a top 5 may have been. Money.
Yep.
Discipline / like parenting tactics.
Yeah.
In-laws. No?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It sounds like we have a huge thing with in-laws. We actually don't. A lot of people have real problems.
It's a stereotypical thing to argue about.
Yeah. So, okay, I'll think about it. What else you got?
Your hall pass list. I think it's a big source of arguing.
Have we ever given any shits about a hall pass list?
People have asked me who's on my list, and I said I don't know. I've never like made a list.
You used to have a list. Kate Beckinsale was on it.
Who?
And Kate Beckinsale was on your list.
She's still on it. That's a good point.
And what's her face? She was just in that movie we watched with Will Ferrell.
We watched a movie with Will. Oh, Rachel McAdams.
Rachel McAdams. She was on your list.
Yeah, maybe back in the day. We saw her at the Daily Show.
Bell, was she on your list?
No. This is getting weird and creepy now. Who's on your list? I was gonna say Paul Rudd is on your list, but you get him every night, so. Right here.
I hear Paul Rudd's upstate, and if he wants to, come on, down.
I'm downstate.
You're
Coach Taylor's on both of our lists.
You're not who?
Coach Taylor.
No, please, Tammy Taylor on it. I'll take her.
I'll take it.
As far as on my list, who else is on my list?
Jack Black.
These are ridiculous. Now I'm just gonna think about my list.
Bradley Cooper's on your list.
Yeah, only Bradley Cooper in like A Star Is Born. Oh my God, a Hangover. Woo! That's some prime Bradley Cooper. Oh, come on. What's his face? Ryan Reynolds list.
Ryan Reynolds is on your list.
Bring it. Anyway, I'm getting
He won't be bringing it. He will not be bringing
But
it.
we do not argue clearly over the list.
So I don't. That was just obviously just a joke. I don't know what the top 5. Do we have top 5 taboo things we don't argue with the kids when the kids are around, or the things we say?
We like literally never talk about financial.
I wrote a thing on like Instagram or something like a year ago about one night we got in an argument and we were talking about money, and Detective Munch kind of noticed, and I think it freaked him out. And afterwards, I went in and apologized and told him, I'm like, buddy, this is like adult stuff. It has nothing to do with you. We try to keep that stuff separate as best we can. When you're a little kid, you don't need to be worrying about that kind of thing. But I mean, it is obviously something that married couples argue about. But I don't know that we have like a top 5 taboo list of things.
Like, I mean, only thing to your, credit to the in-laws or whatever, it's not like, if we're talking about family or family issues, extended family issues, sometimes I'm dealing with stuff with my family or vice versa. We never bring that, like, he doesn't need to know about the adult stuff in family relationships.
He doesn't need to know that you hate pop or whatever, right? So
don't hate pop. It's not like he doesn't know when my sister or your brother's being a real pain in the ass. We never shit talk in front of him,
Yeah, he probably caught a little bit of that last week when we were on vacation with my brother, but I don't think he.
Yeah, and when we visit my family, same thing. Actually, he just ignores entirely.
He's just got his head in a PlayStation.
Yeah,
because we're
and
good.
And you got your head in a beer because you ignore entirely the in-laws. It's like your favorite thing to do. I actually engage and have relationships with my in-laws. So,
well, fair point. But I do like beer.
True, you do like beer. That's accurate.
We don't argue over that.
And my family likes wine, so it's a pretty booze-soaked holiday.
You know what?
Exactly. It's not so bad.
So that was the pretty much kind of. So I separated the arguing topic into a handful of subtopics, and that's pretty much what I had. Those are most of the comments we got was, obviously you can't avoid it. We try not to do low blows. It's important for them to learn so they can communicate. We do the passive aggressive things. Is there anything you wanted to bring up outside of that?
Well, okay. So I would say, especially, we don't do low blows, and we're really good arguers in that we're not bringing up old shit,
Why you got to bring up old shit?
Yeah, we don't bring up old shit. We don't really go down that road, despite apparently the top of this broadcast when you just want to fight about something random.
The big fight we had about on the beach. We try not to fight in public. I'm not a big fan of fighting in public.
We never fight in public, but it was a boiling point time.
It was.
And it was a situation. But, so it happens. Outbursts happen. If you are a parent, don't feel bad about that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, the important thing is
if you're starting to feel like the family needs therapy over it.
If you explode in front of your kids, the important thing is to explain to them, arguments happen, and I still love your mom, or vice versa, or whatever. It's explaining stuff if you can, because the arguments are gonna happen in front of your children sometimes, and then also showing them that you can resolve them, and that the next day you're fine. Try not to go to bed mad, which I cannot say we do all the time. There are times where
I sometimes don't even totally agree with that, and I've heard this thought process too. Like, sometimes going to bed mad brings clarity by morning. Like, it makes things. I prefer not to, but sometimes I think maybe you need that.
Just
but
makes
kids
me
don't see that.
Of the Motley Crue song, "Girl, Don't Go Away Mad, Just Go Away," and I'm sure you were thinking, "Girl, don't go away mad."
Right. No.
Right.
But I've definitely
You like that tune? You more of a same old situation type?
No, you're such a weirdo.
Anyway, I
definitely thought, get the fuck out. But no, I do want to say one thing, which I guess to talk about those subtopics, which we haven't touched on really, is that sometimes, there are also relationships that probably need to be reevaluated, right?
Sure, I mentioned that earlier, yeah.
A recurring thing and stuff, that those will be conversations with you, what you have with your family too. I think we're lucky that we're not quite there unless you keep up your shit. The low blows don't really happen that much, except for sometimes on social media. So that's why it's super fun to follow us, because, kind of the way people are passively aggressively doing that in the kitchen sometimes. We get to do it in front of like hundreds of thousands of people, and it's so much more rewarding.
You get very upset when I organize the junk drawer. One of my favorite lines the other day, and I haven't made this into a tweet yet, but I was going to do it, was when you were doing some rage cleaning, and I was like, I'm going to go clean under the couch, which I thought would be helpful, and you were like, what the fuck? There's a whole ton of shit we have to do. Besides that, I'm like, we never do under the couch. Yeah, and you go, yeah, put that on your list. Put it or make a list and put it at the bottom.
Yeah, like,
funny.
I'm like, go over there, pick up a pen and paper, make a list, and put it at the bottom. Yes, It's
good if you can laugh. Like, I noticed it was a funny response, even though you were legit furious.
I was just really irritated, but yes. We had just gotten in from vacay. There's piles of shit everywhere, and just leave it to probably a man. I hear there are really clean men, and again, if I need a second husband, we should talk. But
you need to be clean. You need to say she's right all the time.
Yeah.
And be Ryan Reynolds.
It doesn't hurt. So yes, but somehow you always find the bottom of the list thing. I'm like, you don't need to like sweep this up or like put away any of this. Let's get under the couch.
We have different priorities. So before we wrap up, there was a comment. So the last episode Pete and I did was about camping. And while we were discussing camping, which is something you enjoy to do, which I will never ever do, so enjoy. I mean,
in my childhood when we had no money or options, sure.
Yeah, when you were forced to camp. We talked about the potential school reopening in the fall, both around the country and in New York. We talked about how we didn't quite yet know. Terry K commented on our YouTube channel, which you can go to see this and comment under specific episodes. She said, our school district will be back full-time for grades preschool through 5, 6 and 9, and the other grades will be half and half, some in person and some online, which it sounds like they're still working out in New York. I know that we're still waiting to hear, but we're a little bit nervous about what the situation is going to be, right?
Yeah, no, we're definitely nervous. I mean, I think the leading thing right now is that halftime, like a group A and a group B, right? Like where you're in school or you're not. And like, I do see the advantage of in-person teaching because I am not a math teacher for my soon-to-be 5th grader. But I also can't see how my pre-K-er is not going to touch literally every surface in person in the class.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? It is different for 6 to 9 versus young kids. But, I think it's hard. And I was talking to a friend earlier in North Carolina, right? And they have options like that. There's an outbreak going on there that luckily right now isn't happening in New York. And they're just opting out, like all remote. I think all these options suck for parents everywhere.
There's no good options, right? So I don't want to be doing it remote all the time, but I also don't want to put, teachers at risk or you at risk or my kids at risk or anything like that. So it's a sticky situation. I
would say I'm totally out on the full time unless you have some huge campus where the kids can actually be socially distanced and stuff. Like, I don't understand how you could have full-time instruction. And I know some places that there are huge outbursts going on, like outbreaks going on. I can't imagine it. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I mean,
on the other hand, it would be nice to have the kids out of the house.
Yes.
Anyway.
Well, I just want Munch to have them both, to have like social interaction. He misses his friends. The little one's going into pre-K. We'd love to have him do all that. But, good luck to everyone out there. Hopefully it gets better.
Stay safe. Wear a mask.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. It was a very special episode. Thank you for joining us, Mom and Buried / Heather.
This was fun.
Wasn't it?
I think we even might have worked some shit out, like over the air, guys.
Well, we'll see what happens as soon as this disconnects. You're going to tell me to go to hell. I can feel it.
It might come to blows. That's why we're in separate rooms.
I'm always nervous that there's something I said that I don't remember I said that she's got filed away. But
not this time.
In front of the kids. We'll try not to argue about it in front of
Thanks
kids.
for having me, Pete. I hope you're back, even though I'm, probably better at your job.
Oh my
You know,
God.
he's quite likable. He's definitely the more likable of you two.
I mean, all you do is talk about how unlikable I am, and you married me, so the joke's on you. Thanks,
You're
everybody. We will catch you next time. I'm sure Heather will be back one way or another. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
I don't know why you would still be watching this isn't a Marvel movie, no matter how much I look like Paul Rudd, which you can deny it all you want. It's there in the eyes, I think. I'm young looking like him. If you enjoyed the podcast, which you obviously did or you wouldn't be listening still, sign up on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you want to listen to. Comment here on YouTube, subscribe, hit that like button. We want to hear from you. Comments, questions, dirty jokes, money, all the money you can give us. We'd love it all. Catch you next time.